that we heard from the committee was that there needs to be a set amount for them for our planning. That's what the recommendation was from the committee. But I think the board felt different. They did not believe that it was at this point totally necessary for us to set that amount. But would like a chance that when we get into our agenda tonight to further expand upon a little bit about what we have found out.
Yeah, so as far as the slide goes, that's basically all I wrote was about the grant part of it. So that they didn't want to determine that amount yet, and that we are directed to continue working on it though.
Very good. Old business, continued discussion on creating an application process. Obviously waste district funding. That's part of it. Do you want to continue on with that now or go on to staff update?
No, that's what the majority of this meeting will be, is the discussion on creating an application process. So our direction last month was to find out if there were any guidelines or anything that we needed to follow from Metro. So we've been working on that. Most of what we received, we found out yesterday or today. So I wasn't really able to send you all anything ahead of time. But the good news is it's a different department than the grants if you're applying for. If Metro's applying for a grant, it's a different department dealing with money going out. So it's a little bit easier.
I thought the other way was bad enough.
Yeah. So we are allowed to set up a grant agreement with applicants, but everything they've sent has used the term nonprofit. So I am in the middle of just double checking that it could theoretically be a business in this case. And it's not like it has to be a nonprofit. It made me wonder if maybe that's what they normally deal with, so they're used to saying that. OMB is currently working on guidelines for how grant agreements are set up. So it's not that they don't do them, they just don't have like a written policy or written guidelines to follow. So I think maybe based on questions being asked from other agencies that they've realized we should probably write this down. So, so we'll get that eventually, but for now, we were given a sample grant agreement. I didn't forward that. I can, so you can kind of look at it. It was, I don't know, it's just like a sample. There's a lot of words. It was between the agency and Blackacre. But so it would be different, but it is a sample that we can look at. They said that once the agreement is written, it does need to be approved by the county attorney. And so as long as everything is good with that, as the project is done, a supplier invoice request is submitted so that the recipient can get the payment. The only real regulation on that recipient is that they have to be in compliance with the Revenue Commission. So they have a process or a way that you can look that up and make sure. So that would actually make sense to do before, like as they apply, it would say that you have to be in compliance, and then that could be screened, yeah. And then there was, based on the amount, it seemed to be that $25,000 was an amount that made a quarterly reporting required. But I feel that there will be some kind of reporting regardless of the amount, but it had some specifications for $25,000 or more, and funds should not, this was a quote of an email, funds should not exceed 25% of operating support.
Who's operating support?
Yeah, can you explain that? I don't understand.
I mentioned that was a quote from an email because I didn't write it, so I don't really know what that means, but
I mean, the way I would take it is they don't want, if you lay out the recipient's budget and the budget is, let's say, $100,000 a year, then you can't give them 26K. You can only give them 25K. But I suspect that they might have a clause that would allow in-kind for organizations like mine where half the staff's working for free.
Right.
But that makes our budget look weird.
Yeah.
But that's what I think it means.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, so scale it down a little. If it was a $10,000 project, we couldn't fund their operations more than 2,500. What if they wanted a $10,000 piece of equipment and they don't need operation support, they just want investment? This would not apply then, right?
That's not how I take it. I think that's loose language there.
It was just in an email. It's probably written clear
Yeah.
somewhere else.
You know, the Metro Council people historically, and first question is, are they still giving out grants to nonprofit groups in town?
I believe
Because-
so.
Yeah.
With discretionary funding.
Discretionary funding.
And, it's a different branch of government. It's got this word discretionary in the front, but I wouldn't be surprised if we wouldn't find some useful guidelines. Because they've been doing it for so long, their track record has shown it doesn't always work well. How we patched up the system when it didn't work well to make it work better.
Well, have we come to an amount that we feel that the district can afford annually?
No, we really didn't. I think that the idea is that we would start at least small, 50,000 is kind of what I had in mind. That gets us up over the $25,000, so we would have to have the quarterly reporting. But I think that it's not an amount that is going to be hurt the district whatsoever. I think they have the funds. Revenue right now is running really well. So we have the rollover amount, which is fine. We're in good shape there. So $50,000, I think it would probably be a minimum. I'm not saying that that's what the board would go with, but that's what I would recommend that the committee work with. And if you do at that 50,000 mark, we can do several grants out of that, or one big grant. Just depends upon the proposals, I would say. So, it lets us get our feet in, underneath of us to figure out how this thing is supposed to work, at least in the first year.
My read of the body language was this was a new idea and they hadn't given it much thought and they were open to suggestions, but they needed something to get their arms around.
If you're doing a competitive grant, I would think that you would want more than one opportunity to win, to acquire enough applicants. So if you only have $50,000, I would at least have two $25,000 grants available. And if you do a competitive grant, you're going to have some type of evaluation criteria that you lay out. And really, we have to decide what are they going to be able to fund with that grant, and whether there's a matching contribution that's going to be required for that grant.
Friendly amendment, you said at least two grants of $25K, and I think you meant at least two grants.
Of whatever amount.
Exactly. Because if we
Thank you.
got 5 good ones for 10K.
Absolutely, good.
And I think there, at least this is how it works for regular bidding for businesses. I don't know if it's a little bit different for grants, but if it's over 30,000, you would need a competitive bid. But below that, you would not. And I think under 5,000, you would not need anything. It could just be a direct payment versus I think between 5 to 30, you would need to get some quotes or do some evaluation. So the benefit of the smaller grants is if the goal is to work with smaller nonprofits that are doing projects, maybe sponsor events or smaller initiatives, it makes the barrier lower for organizations to be able to access that funding. If you make it competitive, then that means you would need somebody with the capacity to put an application together and go through the whole process and jump the hoops, which, we might want to do on some projects, but not others. So just something to keep in mind with the pros and cons of those options.
Agreed.
So, of course, because of the holiday schedule, this meeting is shorter than usual. And I was hoping that we would try to, I had this, I think I added something from last time. This is a similar slide from last month, but I was kind of hoping that we could just focus on the first two. And maybe get some notes down so we can work toward something that can be written. whether it's a statement, paragraph, however much it takes. But I do feel like having an overall grant goal, or not just for, and I don't mean for each in particular applicant, but for this program, to even offer it at all. What is our goal with this? And then the qualifications section, more like being able to list out like what the applicant would read before they applied.
But then wouldn't you also want the applicant's goal? Because I think whatever goal is put together by the applicant has to relate to why we exist as a 109
Right,
group.
which is why we have to give that information to them in
But
this.
whatever we're going to fund also has to deal with that goal.
Yes,
So I had a suggestion on that account. We could say at the get-go, this is who the grantor is, and have a decently long paragraph explaining what the grantor, meaning us, meaning you all, is supposed to be accomplishing in the world. And then the next thing could say, the project you propose must help us to achieve those goals. And then I would give a scoring bonus if it's an innovative approach. So if somebody's just asking for gloves and plastic bags so that scouts can pick up litter, that counts, but it isn't innovative and you don't get extra points. But if somebody comes in with a clever idea that, I'm just making all this up as I talk, but if somebody comes in with a clever idea that we think might have legs and be replicated by others, that should get a scoring bonus. Because then we learn something in addition to accomplishing the goals.
and we do have Bruce's criteria spreadsheet that you sent us, and I think we can use that eventually to help create that
Oh, for
criteria for scoring and being very detailed, so that way it's,
You bring up a very good point, Sarah Lynn, because initially with the Indiana Recycling Market Development Board, and we were approving grant requests for recycled plastic picnic tables all day long for the first 3 or 4 years until we, struck out and we hit a big home run with the aluminum smelter up in northeast Indiana. And they received $1 million and no interest loan. But that kind of got us kicked off into the innovation side of things. And it kind of ties in with Carl's idea about the innovation initiative that he rolled out. So you have to start somewhere.
Right.
And I agree with what you said about outlining a goal. What do we want to accomplish? Recycling, waste diversion, you name it, reuse, those type of things.
Well, there may be two ways to look at this. I mean, of course, we want them to be aligned with the main goal, but do we want to give more priority to somebody who's helping us kind of further what we're already doing, or fill gaps where maybe we don't have something happening right now, but we maybe want to fill an area?
Well, to be clear, we're just developing the process. We're not even gonna be awarding the grants. That'd be the work of the 109 board. We're making sure that we collect the information to give the 109 board enough information to make good decisions on. The other thing I wanted to add is, and walking in the room, we have the mission and vision of the Waste Management District posted right on the, that would be at the top,
Yeah.
If anything that supports this is eligible for a grant.
and I would assume we'd include the 5-year plan as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I would-
The other thing I wanted to
At least
ask.
an executive summary.
Yes, thank you. Otherwise, I'll never read it.
DOA.
So obviously, they're going to be asking for a certain amount of money. I think we should also ask them for the anticipated diversion or recovery mass, and you can make decisions on dollars per pound or something like that. If somebody wants $500 to divert 500 pounds of waste, and if somebody else wants 500 pounds to divert 2,000 pounds of waste, you have a cost benefit analysis there, so.
I would add one thing from the county attorneys, any monies that participants have to be for the public purpose. And it has to satisfy 3 questions. Whether the appropriation is required for the general good of all the inhabitants of the city. Does it promote the public health, safety, morals, general welfare, security, prosperity, and contentment of all of those, or at least a substantial part of the inhabitants and residents? And whether the expenditure confers a direct benefit of reasonably general character to a significant part of the public as distinguished from a remote or theoretical benefit. So if the answer is yes to all of those,
I need to hear that third one again.
whether the expenditure confers a direct benefit of reasonably general character to the significant part of the public as distinguished from a remote or theoretical benefit.
Okay.
That's from a
Yes.
lawyer. So.
Yeah, really.
That's where you're at. So if the answer is yes to all three of those, then it is for the public benefit. I don't know how that works well with grants. But I think that that's something that we have to also include is something in our, I guess, our qualifications for the money that makes sure that money is eligible as an expenditure from the Waste Management District. That was what got us here in the first place, is whether or not the request from Feed Louisville was eligible as an expense anyway. So just keep that in mind.
Is it possible for you to copy and paste those requirements and email them to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So one idea that I had, and this reinforces it, is if we get a neighborhood association that wants to run some sort of litter prevention program, and the quantification of the expenditures and the benefits all are really just that neighborhood, I would argue we might want to consider it anyway if they can make a compelling argument that it's a replicatable model that other neighborhoods could use, and then that's how we meet that criterion.
And that other neighborhoods are not currently using.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
In addition to like estimating the amount of waste diverted, the amount of people that it will impact and affect. Because
Per
if you're talking about a neighborhood association that's 200 homes, but if it can be replicated to,
You can almost say that anything that is diversion is
Good
for
argument.
the public purpose.
Because we all use the same
We all use
landfill.
a finite landfill space.
Also, if we have a list of organizations that we know might be interested in this kind of grant, it might be worth doing a survey or just having some kind of, having them come and talk to us at one of these meetings about where they think the needs are, just to help inform what kind of program they would find, accessible and beneficial, and where the funding needs are.
And I would give extra points to a proposal that looks like the quantification of benefits isn't just a swag. Do y'all know that engineering term?
Yeah, so I'll tell you something guess.
That's right. Scientific wild blank guess.
We used to do them all the time, didn't we, Bob?
Right. But, but if somebody, like the one idea that I was thinking is if you got some students to do a pre-measurement of litter, I don't know why I'm stuck on litter, but it's tangible and easy. And then you had them come back and do another analysis, and the way they did their analysis looked pretty good. That deserves a lot more attention than does one where they're just saying, well, it looks better.
So you're just saying that there needs to be a better one would have actual data in it rather than just somebody's
A swag,
thought.
yeah.
Makes sense.
And I'm not saying we have to reject the unsophisticated proposals. I am saying we ought to give some extra credit for the ones that are more thought out, more replicatable, that kind of thing.
Would we want to add anything about the potential to create jobs as well? I think that was in the Indiana.
It's a criteria. Yeah, it's one of the scoring criteria.
Yeah, so I think that's a good one. I mean, we may not be getting there with $50,000.
The reason that's in there is to create employment tax and whatnot that feeds back into the state. So
Yeah,
it's the same thing would apply here.
The operative
I
word
think
was
that-
leads to.
Going back to one of the things that we had at the convention, Resource Recycling Conference convention, was we potentially help someone create a business proposal that is given to funders that could potentially take that idea and expand it, and you create a small business based upon their idea. If it's something that is, we're not doing, but it's in the area of potentially reuse of some sort, and you create employment through that while we're getting our diversion, it's a win-win. I don't know if we're going to get there in the first year, but I would love to be able to look down the road at anything that we develop that could potentially include creating jobs.
That's a win, but I don't think you want to make it a criteria because somebody may be a good volunteer organization doing something and you might not add a job, but you might do a lot of good. So I wouldn't want to make it a absolute criteria. It's a nice,
Or a
Yeah, like a
bonus.
secondary thing, like
secondary.
primary is the version, secondary is
it's a
jobs.
want.
So you weight the answers, correct?
And he'll give a lot of weight to a proposal, but you don't want to make it.
Well, it's almost like what, if all else is equal, the more jobs gets more points, but the waste would be kind of the main criteria.
So you don't kick out something that doesn't create a job.
So basically, we want to set up our application form to collect as many different kinds of criteria that we can think of, and then they can be weighted, against each other. But we want to ask, what is the economic impact, the waste reduction, the number of people affected? We want to make sure to, and then maybe leave it open. If they have something particular to their idea and that we hadn't thought about that, say other, benefits, and let them tell us.
I mean, another idea is on the East Coast, I've heard of places like, I guess, Goodwill that take mattresses that otherwise in this community are all going to the landfill. And they apparently wrap them in shrink wrap and then heat them up some way and it kills any
Kills the
bed
bed
bugs. Yeah. And then they put them in the Goodwill store for low income families who can't afford brand new mattresses. Those things are ridiculously expensive. And that keeps a big chunk out of the landfill and it creates jobs because they're heavy and they've got to do all this physical work. So if someone were to do a pilot here in Louisville, even if it didn't create a job right here and now, if it led to an idea being seen as viable that created jobs, I'd still want to give that some tipping points.
So
Good example.
To your point earlier about creating some kind of business acceleration, so how would you see the grant supporting that? Would we be helping them create the business plan, or would they come with a business plan and then we'd help them try to implement it?
I'm not sure when I say that, I don't think that we're quite there yet with this process. I
Yeah.
think it can either be a spin-off of the grant process eventually, or it would have to be a standalone accelerator.
Right.
I think at the conference, there was a company that that's what they came in and actually ran that for you. Maybe it's a proposal from them and bringing them in to see what they have to say, learn a little bit about it. Hard to get everything out of a 30-minute speech at a conference, but I did love the idea of creating jobs and getting diversion or the city clean.
Last month, we kind of talked about having categories, maybe. And I think, sorry, I don't have that old slide up, but we had kind of, I think what we talked about was more like compost or reuse
I don't
or
know
things
that
like
you
that.
can do categories for 50,000. I mean, I just don't think that, I think we'd stultify things rather
Yeah.
than encourage them.
Well, what I was going to say is instead of categories based on like topic, it could be possible that they apply, or I don't even know if it's a category we offer or it's just sort of a checkbox, like if it's equipment versus, I don't know, like the startup kind of thing. I don't know how you.
I mean,
use words
ultimately,
for that.
whatever we create in the first year is gonna be the pilot project, right? The applicants, whoever they are, whoever hears about this and whoever brings ideas to the table, they're just gonna be competing against each other, In 1 year, we might have, just a handful of different ideas and the ones that filter to the top and then we can fit together or that the 109 board can fit together within the budget, they get it. And then the next year, we have a completely different mix of applicants. So really the job to us is to make the process expandable and as user-friendly to as many different applicants as possible and let them bring to the table what they've got.
I think it's important that we recognize that there are small groups in town that probably don't have a 501c3 registration. They may not even have a bank account, but they're doing some really good stuff.
Yes.
And I don't know that the government can hand money to somebody who's not a 501c3. they probably need to require that. But I think we ought to be fairly flexible about certain kinds of sophistication, or we are gonna block out a whole lot of community groups. So I'd like to err on the side of encouraging creative ideas while always having accountability. But I want the accountability to be something they can really achieve.
So did you
You
just
know.
suggest that the
A business plan is
501c3 is a
like,
requirement for getting the funding?
I beg your pardon?
Did you just say that recipients would have to be 501c3s to get any
I
funding?
think that might be the case. I mean, you were saying one model
Not
allowed it to
necessarily.
go to businesses, right? But I mean, I think you have to be some sort of an entity. I don't know that you can be an ad hoc group, because how do you hold an ad hoc group accountable?
So you're just saying we can't give any money to the Boy Scout troops, huh?
Well, no, they're incorporated.
Yeah, you'd need a W-9 with a.
Then
Yeah,
you're
right.
also cutting out like your businesses or, you know.
Yeah.
So we had the example last month of like a apartment complex, and the apartment owner wanted to make an investment to encourage recycling. He's not gonna be a
So
501c3.
I'm gonna retract the 501c3 and just make it B. I think it has to be some sort of an incorporation so that you can hold them accountable. It can't be a
But
group
then
that can scatter.
automatically you've eliminated an awful lot of people.
I'm not sure.
It can't be an individual essentially, right? Like,
I don't-
because
No,
it has to
I-
land in
I would
some
agree.
account,
No,
and it
No.
would not be an individual, so it would have to be some entity that has a bank account.
I mean, neighborhood associations, they're all incorporated, I think. Scout troops are all incorporated. Schools have some sort of designation. I just think it's gotta have some accountability.
Yeah, and I don't even know if we get to decide that. I think that would just be
No,
procurement.
but
rules.
it's what we
Yeah.
encourage or
Right.
advise.
But see, there are other organizations, like truly informal ones, who may need this grant money the most because they aren't, you know,
I agree.
incorporated. It's like, I'll give you an example. The Women Environmental Leaders of Louisville is a networking group. We have no officers, we have no money. We couldn't do anything if we wanted to unless we just literally passed a hat. But if we came up with a really good idea and we just needed some seed money to do it, you know, but if we're not a 501c3 because we don't have a charter and bylaws and a treasury and officers, you know, that would cut
Well,
that group out.
the only thing we were told so far from OMB was that the recipient must be in compliance with the Revenue Commission. So there has to be some check, whether it is
Yeah.
an individual.
Or does
So
it
it'd have to
just
go
mean
through
that, or does it just mean you can't be out of
A
compliance?
member, or it could be an individual
Right.
representing an idea.
I mean, I think they're probably gonna have minimum requirements across the board for what the organization legally needs to be. But the workaround for groups like you mentioned would, I mean, there's situations where those types of groups work with a pass-through,
That's right.
like, you know, partner with another existing established 501c3.
Maybe what we need to have is the definition of what that means, the recipient being in compliance.
With the Revenue Commission?
What do they look at to
So,
make sure that's
Occupational
true?
taxes,
I mean, yeah, I think.
I guess they'd have to have a taxpayer ID number and.
Yeah.
right.
We've been looking at this extreme, but the other extreme might just be, well, maybe they don't have a criminal record or don't have anything against them.
Well, but that's probably not the revenue commission.
Yeah.
Here's
So-
my concern. If we hand off 10, 25K to a group that just messes it up and doesn't do anything and doesn't deliver, we're gonna be hard put to keep the program going. So I think we have to have reasonable accountability measures built
Well, I think
into
that's
it.
built into the application. If, you know, if we make that a criteria, tell us about your, you know, tell us your taxpayer status, da, 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 da. And if they say, well, I don't have it, well, then that knocks points off. But if they're only coming asking for $200 to do this very specific thing, you know, maybe for $200, it's worth the risk, you know, but that's got to be on the 109 board to make that decision, you know. You got this applicant who's really, really informal. They want $200. We got this big corporation, you know, with the EIN number and all that asking for $30,000, you know, maybe easier to say yes to the $200 applicant.
I think the amount really doesn't matter when it comes to what we have to do. I mean, I think it's gonna come down to what the Revenue Commission is gonna require. If the policy that they haven't written that says that it has to be just a nonprofit, I mean, our decision is pretty much made. I would love to be able to give $500 to an individual with a great idea, but I'm not sure that we can do that. That's gonna be some legal and part of that, so I just want to.
So we knew that through this discussion, we would get more questions, and our contact, Christina Scotland is our public works contact that connects us to OMB, and she has never been in this position to do the giving away of money. So other agencies have, so she's got lots of contacts to figure this out, but it's kind of like she didn't even know what questions to ask because we haven't really done this before. So I think we have some clarifying questions to get answered. But I think as we kind of wrap up this meeting, I want to make sure, as far as staff work, like what else can we be compiling for next month? For example, if we know that there's going to be some background information in this application that someone reads, we can just kind of get that started, like including the mission and the synopsis of the 5-year solid waste management plan. So, and then of course, having those 3 questions, maybe we can get an attorney to read that and write it a little differently so we understand, but to get, I mean, those are the 3 things I have that we know we want
Could we
shown
Could
to
we
them.
maybe set up like a Google Doc or something and circle them out? So as you have ideas, put them in these categories, and so by the time we come back next month or the month after, we've populated it with some of these thoughts, that all of us could have access to and just start either questions or ideas,
That's a question. I mean, I hate to bring it, but it's like open meetings or open records, whether or not that we can
Oh, wow.
business online like that. I'm not sure the answer to that.
You can't have 2 or 3 communicating it, or more than 2 communicating through any media.
And does that count as communication? Just writing things on
I don't know.
it's like having a whiteboard that everyone.
I wouldn't want to
We
argue
would-
that.
we'd have
It's a draft.
Look for this in the
Yeah.
state auditor's category. If our county attorney can't answer that for us, then it would have to be an opinion that is asked from the other auditors.
One of the
I think what-
recommendations, I'm sorry, go ahead, Samantha.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think to your question, something that might help is having a list of examples of the types of initiatives we would fund, because I always find those useful when I'm applying to grants to know what the funder is actually looking for. So that might be like a good way to start brainstorming what types of projects we might.
Well, and that gets into her categories. I mean, in a way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's good.
Okay.
Would you all ever see, and I know that we want innovation, but there's a certain thing that we would want someone to try to take on. We'll give a grant to Sarah Lynn's mattress idea. And putting that out there, would we see being very descriptive as to what we want? I know that that's not allowing somebody to be innovative,
Oh.
but it's something that we would really like to get done.
Idea.
I think we could do that, but I don't think we could do that in the first year. I think we have to kind of stumble and go through something. And once we've done that and we've got a process, I think that's a great idea. I'm sure you want to recycle shingles.
Been trying to for a long time.
I know.
The one thing that we steer clear of is awarding monies that are utilized to buy equipment that can be used for things other than the purpose of the grant.
Right.
As in a pickup truck.
Yeah.
I need a pickup truck because I'm gonna reduce the amount of litter. I'm gonna go around and pick up cigarette butts. But that pickup truck's used a 100th of the time for picking up cigarette butts and 999 times for driving back and forth to wherever they wanna go.
That also gets back to the things you read us, because basically what you've got to do is benefit the public. You can't benefit a single thing. And here in Kentucky, it's always somebody gets their driveway paved and they shouldn't have, because the road should have been paved for the public, not the driveway for
Sure.
that person. So, yeah,
It's not only in Kentucky.
I know, but I've been here for so long, that's the one everybody gives as an example.
The,
But I've known of, there's a nearby county where they take the sewage fees and buy pickup trucks for city officials.
that wouldn't happen.
Well, let's go do something about that.
I did.
Yeah, I like the idea of trying to consolidate thoughts. I think we're gonna have to all consolidate thoughts on our own, bring them back to the next meeting. And I don't know how much time we have, but it's been good discussion. I like the idea. I think if we have 50,000, I still think we need more than one opportunity for people to be aggressive in applying. And, we're gonna get some interesting ones. We have to remember, whatever we promote to the 109 board and they approve, it's gonna fall back upon us to evaluate. So let's build it the way we can evaluate it.
If the committee wants to propose a different amount to the board, 100,000, 75,000, a million, or not, but if you all want
It's
to,
Christmas time, 50.
if you all have a different number, is what I'm saying.
No, we like your number. We are
Yeah.
complaining.
And I think if somebody's got a really compelling idea and they need 75K, they're probably gonna tell us for next year. They're not, people like that aren't too shy. They'll speak up.
Well, you just touched on another issue. Grant award entities, are they eligible every year, or is there a waiting period between grant awards?
I hear my
Another
mentor
thing to
saying
remember.
if it's on the merits, don't worry about that, but I don't know.
So
I mean, it
pleasure
depends.
of the
If it's,
group.
if it's $5,000 grants, I could see where, yeah, you could go for another, but if you got 25K, maybe you ought to have to wait a few years, but I would like to start out with things fairly small and relatively conservative. Did I say that? And then expand as we get our sea legs about us.
Yeah, I think it would be important to show success in the first year, so it would have to be something you all feel comfortable managing as the, day-to-day administrators for the grant applications.
Well, great discussion. Do you think we need to dwell on it anymore tonight?
Nope, we can move on to the one other thing.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much time we have.
Just a minute.
5:15. All right, it's 5:15, so thank you all for your input on that subject. Next one, do we have anything on the staff update? We have new staff introductions.
Yes, which is basically just one, which is Rachel Young over there. So
Hi,
I
Rachel.
just put her picture up here, plus our group photo, because now we officially have 4 full-time education staff. So
Wow.
we took a group photo the other day. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm Rachel Young. I started back in November, Thanksgiving week. So I'm excited to be here. I've been here about 3 weeks now. I'm loving it. I'm the education supervisor. So I'll be working with you all throughout the months, and I'm excited to be here.
What's your background?
My background is in classroom education and non-traditional education. So most recently, I was at Jefferson Memorial Forest as a naturalist. Yeah.
Welcome.
So, well, thank you.
All right, moving right along. Public input. Anyone in the audience wishing to be heard?
Are they all staff?
All right, moving on, announcements. Obviously, in-person 109 board meeting following this meeting tonight. Starting at 5:30 in 15 minutes. And our next advisory committee meeting on January 22nd, 2025.
We have, I sent out an email to everyone regarding the state conference, the inaugural state conference, which is going to be in February. It had a link, I think, on there that maybe you can potentially utilize to get to the agenda. But, I'm not sure of the fees. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but just want you guys to put it on your calendar. Again, I think that whatever this thing is going to be, it's going to be how we as stakeholders can set the course for the state when it comes to these things, which I think is sorely overdue.
Where is
Is
the
it every
conference?
third
Is it in Louisville?
Wednesday?
It is going to be in Louisville, which is great. And I
Why isn't it
I actually
showing up?
think that they're going to do more across the state, but February is.
You're
what
right.
it's gonna be.
Yes, clarification, January 1st is on a Wednesday, so it makes the 15th the 3rd. I apologize. It'll be the 22nd, so actually it would be the board
And
meeting.
let the record reflect that the chronologically impaired one caught it.
Yes, thank you, Sarah Lynn.
Kudos
So
to
what-
Sarah Lynn.
So the advisory committee of January is the 15th.
Duly noted.
I think I looked from the bottom up.
Is that gonna
And there's
be an
5
online
Wednesdays
meeting?
in January, so.
Is that an online meeting or an in-person meeting? I can't do an in-person meeting. I could,
I don't know.
Probably
I think
do
that's
an
part of the
online meeting.
discussion and the
Another-
board meeting. Is about the schedule, so.
for what's worth, I could do the 20th, 22nd with no problem.
Actually, the board agenda has it correct.
Well, that's because Pete writes that one and I write.
Hope it's not contagious.
Well, we will be sending invites regardless, so when we know, we will clarify if it's WebEx versus in person. So thank you all.
Can we do
And
mixed?
Or do we want to do a
Or
hybrid
mixed.
effort?
I don't know. We
Maybe
have
alternate.
I'll be honest with you, trying to do mixed,
Everybody hates
WebEx and in person is painful. It just is. I would think that we would want to stay away from that as well.
Why is it painful?
Because someone that's sitting on the outside, being able to communicate well is very difficult. For them to hear is also very difficult. Metro Council has it where they do it that way, but they're set up with microphones for each person, which makes it a little bit easier. You don't have that luxury.
We got it at LCAN, we got a AI something speaker and camera, and whoever's speaking, the camera moves to them so the person who's watching can see. And when you can see somebody speak, you can hear them better in reality.
That's true.
And it was only, I think we paid about $300 for that.
Maybe that's the first grant.
I would agree, it's very challenging. It's
Nobody
always,
likes it.
nobody remembers to go to the screen, catch their votes, particularly if it's a board member.
I don't know,
Committee
we use
member.
it for our city council meetings, they're mixed. But I appreciate what you're saying because we have a little more. We have a person there who knows what he's doing.
I don't know how to say that.
I wondered about that.
His job is.
It's technology.
Yeah.
All right, any other business we need to address? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Motion by Sarah Lynn, second.
Second.
Second by Corinne. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you all very, very much. Merry Christmas,
Yeah, it's funny
everyone.
that I can do it.
Thank you.
Happy holiday seasons.
If
So we are
any
having
of
a
you
board
guys are gonna
meeting
stay
there?
in, there's a board packet.
Can I see the agendas or anything I want? I gotta get started with Christmas Day.
Saying we have to give up
I
the
know, I'm
chairs.
feeling
We have
anxious.
our-
Gotta give up your